Thank you, Frank, and thank you, Richard, for nicely warming up the room for me. It's a really live topic, though, because I actually have products in the market that we have in the US that are all non-GMO, and we've started advertising this week. And feedback from the market was that I needed to put that little non-GMO butterfly on my packaging. And I'm a geneticist, and from a principles point of view, I didn't want to put the GMO butterfly on my packaging because I believe a lot of the genetic technologies are safe. But from a business and marketing point of view, I'm going to have to look at putting that little butterfly on my box because it's going to sell me more boxes. So it's a live issue and very interesting. And I think what's really exciting about today is that I think what we've already heard shows the colour of ag innovation at Otago. This university is known for medical innovation and medical research. And I think a few people asked us questions as to why we were bringing agri in. But from the talks today, you can see the importance of looking at agri with a wide lens and looking at agri not just from a on-farm perspective, and that there are many, many things that contribute to agri, which I believe farmers know on a day-to-day basis, and that agri is incredibly complex, and we must start thinking about agri as more complex than we are at the moment. So with that in mind, I'm very aware that I'm also in between you and lunch, and I'm about to put you off your lunch because I'm going to start with some human health, but allow me to travel along a little and we will get into agri as well. These are 8-year-old boys, and an 8-year-old child growing up today will have eaten more sugar in their lifetime than someone 50 years ago will have eaten in their whole lifetime. That is the change of diet that we are seeing today. Chronic disease is massively on the rise. So I told you I'm going to put you off your lunch. Chronic disease like diabetes, heart disease, dementia is now believed to be a result of chronic disease or chronic inflammation. Many cancers are hugely on the rise. In fact, the World Health Organization have put it as one of their #1 health concerns, and that 3 in 5 people living in the US will die of chronic disease within the next 20 years. My business partner is someone who suffers from an autoimmune disease called sarcoidosis, and he is, our meeting together was the genesis of our company Zest, and he has this really annoying saying that he rolls out constantly, but that saying is that inflammation is the smoking gun at the scene of every crime. And when we're thinking inflammation, it's really important to understand in our bodies that inflammation is a good thing when we sprain an ankle or when we have to respond to coronavirus. We need to have a localized inflammation response to boost up our immune system or to send the right signals and repair mechanisms to that region. But what's happening with chronic inflammation is that our bodies are in the constantly inflamed state, largely because of the lifestyles that we are living. And we've just had an interesting comment about cell phones, and Helen and I have discussed cell phones in our teenagers many times, and the fact that every time we look at our phone, which is something like 150 times a day for many of us, we pick up our cell phone 150 times a day. I'm sitting by my mum over there and she's probably ready to bump me for picking it up too many times already. But every time we do that, we shoot this cortisol up into our brain, and this constant chronic kind of or constant cortisol production is leading to this inflammation. But it's not the only thing. So lack of sleep and our diet. So let me talk a little bit about that. It's really cool that I'm following some eminent virologists and microbiologists and botanists, because I think this concept of biodiversity, we're only just beginning to understand in the agricultural world, but in parallel to that, we're only just beginning to understand how vital it is for human health. So when I walked into the room today, I brought with me about 1 trillion microbes, and all of you also brought with you your trillion microbes, and all those microbes are interacting and doing all sorts of crazy things. And I think what we're only just beginning to understand is that these microbes play a critical role in our health. And when we have this constant inflammation, we can damage the microbes, or we can have the wrong types of microbes growing within us, so we're getting the signaling wrong. And these types of signals are very important for our brain health, for our heart health, for our lung health, and our digestion as well. There's some really interesting science now showing that this is published in a nutritional journal, that when people immigrate, or they followed a cohort of immigrants from Asia into the US, and they assessed the gut biodiversity while they were from their origin, and then as they lived in the US for a certain number of years. And what they found was over the years that the biodiversity of their gut rapidly declined the longer they lived in the US, and they put this down to reduced biodiversity of diet and more highly processed food. So the rule is, and this is where you're going to have to think about lunch and think about dinner, is that we should all be eating about 20 to 30 plant species per week to get that a variety of different prebiotic fiber types, which are what drive the good bacteria in our guts. And what I haven't mentioned as well is that we heard that wonderful talk from Janice where we talked about fungi and mycorrhiza, and we also heard from Gemma that we're carrying all these viruses that are not necessarily causing disease. Similarly, our bodies are probably carrying a bunch of fungal species that we're not even talking about. We haven't even really gone down that path. So we are only just at the tip of understanding this enormous ecosystem that we carry within ourselves, but are also how that connects to the environment. So how does this all parallel with agriculture? So many of you know that I've spent much of my career in agriculture. And when I started really in my new business, exploring that connection of food and human health, I've always been interested in food and human health, but particularly plant bioactives and human health. I suddenly really started seeing these parallels of this loss of biodiversity within our own health and within our own diet, and what that was doing for our health, and that parallel loss of biodiversity that we're seeing in the planet. 15% of plant species provide 90% of global food. And of that global food, so those main plant species, of those 15% are rice, wheat, corn, and potato, I think it's potato. So of those, about 40% of that are fed to livestock globally. So we are seeing this issue around biodiversity, which Hamish very articulately brought up before. What do we want our farm systems to look like? But then how do we also make them commercial, which I'm going to explore a little bit more soon. Sadly, and we're starting to see this. I was talking to Mum before about the area that she was brought up in, Poverty Bay. She's just been up there last week and seeing the impact of climate change. But on top of that, what we're seeing, and we're probably not realising, I think we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, is that we are losing species at a faster rate than any of the Earth's past extinction events. And I think, sadly, in New Zealand, we have pointed the finger at farmers without really thinking about the whole problem and the whole solution. And that's what I've liked about today, is that we haven't been just kind of thinking one solution, one problem. We are in an ecosystem. Our farming and our food system is part of that ecosystem, as I said, part of connected to human health. But so we need to think about agriculture as part of a solution than the problem, rather than a problem. And I think it's a reframing of how we think about what we can do in agriculture and how we can produce food as what we need as a country. And a big part of that is thinking about how we incentivize food production. So at the moment, we incentivize yield and some amount of quality. That's fundamentally what farmers are incentivized to do, and they've responded accordingly. We also incentivize thinking about our food chain. Again, we only tend to look at that, but we also incentivize, when you walk down a supermarket, we incentivize the most revolting, highly processed, highly plasticized products with very few ingredients in them. And that is what we're selling, and that's what we're feeding to our children. So if we need to look at the agriculture as a solution, we need to look at the whole supply chain, right through to what we're feeding our children, rather than just focusing and pointing the gun at farmers. Gun is the wrong word, sorry. Pointing the finger at farmers. And part of that, but part of that is looking at margins at retail and even things like our supermarket structure that we're seeing in New Zealand. And in the UK, it's something like 80% of food that is sold in the UK is controlled by 4 big companies. So this is not just a New Zealand problem, this is a massive global problem that we don't seem to have the tools to do anything about. Okay, so there's my rant. But as many of you know, I wanted to talk. I've ranted on about adding value to agricultural products for my whole career. And we as agriculturalists, I think, have been very good at responding to market signals. And when we look at the land use change over the last 30, 40 years, it's really since the 1990s, it is enormous. So I just wanted to use this particular scenario as an example of some of the challenges we have when we think about land use change right now in this time. And this is based on some work that I was doing when I was still at Abacus Bio. It's a couple of years old now, but Lou May, who's over there, was helped with this as well as a few other people. And this was funded by Venture Southland. And some of you will know this story that now the actual factory for processing the oat milk is going to be moved to Canterbury, which I think is a little bit sad, but anyway, what we were tasked with doing was looking at the oat milk opportunity in Southland from a farmer lens and understanding what the benefits were to farmers, potentially environmentally, but also production-wise, and what might be the best ways for Southland to approach the oat milk as an opportunity. We've also been able to teach or use this as a case study within the Ag Innovation class here at Otago, and it goes down really well. So as I said, land use, we have seen land use change over time, and this shows the changes that happened over the 1990 to 2019 period, where the number of dairy cattle increased by 82% and sheep decreased by 53% during that time. Looking all around that Canterbury region, I remember I was doing my PhD in wheat genetics around then, and that was when the dairy shift was really, really happening. That was all traditional cropping land at the time. So this is I guess the opportunity from an oat milk perspective is the global demand for plant-based milks is increasing. And on top of that, someone raised cellular agriculture before. Cellular agriculture has a potential to disrupt milk production, particularly I think in the ingredients part of milk production. So there is a changing dynamic, and if we don't, there's I guess a point as farmers where you have to say, at what point do I jump in any kind of land use thinking? And I know some of you have made those jumps, but at what point do I test? At what point do I jump? And so what we were really looking at was, what is the opportunity for oats? Let me carry it. So this is just an environmental comparison of milk, and I know that I'm going to upset some people by even calling some of these products milk, because they're not milk and they're not nutritionally equivalent, might I add. But you can see there that basically cow's milk has a higher carbon footprint, higher greenhouse gas, higher water use, and has more eutrophication issues as well. So it doesn't particularly win on any environmental stats. So when we were working with the farmers, there didn't seem to be a lot of point in really exploring the environmental work much further, because the oats were always going to win on that. So we thought, well, actually, we needed to look at it more from an economic perspective and thinking about that side of it. So Kevin Wilson put these figures together, and these are based around the economic farm surplus. Remember, these are a couple of years old, but if we were to put today's figures in, they would drop a little, and sadly for those of you in the room who are sheep and beef farmers, the differential would be greater in terms of the difference. But you can see from here, the bottom line is the economic farm surplus per hectare of dairy versus winter grazing versus barley versus oats versus sheep and beef. Now, if I were to take that and put those figures in front of a dairy farmer and ask them to convert to oats, what would you think the response would be? Yeah. And on top of that, this is what was, so when the oats opportunity in Southland was put forward, it was really sold as this could really shift the environment for Southland. because you could replace all those dairy farms with oat farms. But actually to supply enough oats for that $30 million capacity factory that they were going to build, they only needed 1,200 hectares of oats. That's not many dairy farms. So the maths don't work. And this is where we really want to add value, and we really want to look at some of these opportunities, but it's more complex than just saying farmers change your land use. And where we really got to in that report was focusing on the best way to really drive that oat opportunity was to look at the other side of the equation and how they were going to add value post-manufacture to the oat milk to be truly globally different from any other oat milk, because oat milk, like any other milk, is being commoditized, and the big players like Sanitarium are coming in. So anyway, that was sort of my last project for Abacus, and about that time I was also setting up Zest. And I just want to quickly talk about some of the plants we use there, but also use one other example of how we can value add and what that might mean for the future. So we use a lot of blackcurrant in our lozenges. Blackcurrants are really good for lung health. They promote the production of something called M2 macrophages, and they also are antiviral and antioxidants. So for people with COPD and asthma, they're the type of people that are using these lozenges really successfully. We use our blackcurrants from a company called Verberry in South Canterbury, and it's really interesting because the blackcurrant market itself has had a similarly checkered past. So many of you remember great tranches of blackcurrants in South Canterbury and then that Canterbury region some years ago were getting pulled out. And they were getting pulled out because Ribena was the main buyer of the blackcurrants, and I believe they stopped buying blackcurrants from New Zealand and started to buy them from South America somewhere. And so suddenly the blackcurrant industry was decimated. Now, about a year into starting Zest, we built our whole product range around these beautiful blackcurrants, and our blackcurrant grower rang us and said, they're organic blackcurrant growers, and they said there's a worldwide shortage of blackcurrants because people are starting to understand the importance of anthocyanins for human health. And so we can sell our entire 2 years supply to one German company, and the price is going to go up. We were 1 year into starting our company. This is the walking the talk bit, right? It sounds really good when you talk about it, and walking about it can be more challenging. So we suddenly had to come up with 2 years of money to buy our next 2 years of blackcurrant supply, and thank goodness we've got an amazing investor in our company. Thank goodness. So we were able to do that. But it highlighted to me that we kind of, as farmers, you understand the ups and downs of markets, and so it's a big jump to suddenly plant blackcurrants. But similarly, at the manufacturing and the taking to market, we also have to ride these. And my only really thought about how we manage this is thinking of what our ancestors did in setting up cooperatives and things like that, is that they were brave. They did do that manufacturing. They did have the base here in New Zealand. And I strongly believe that we need more companies manufacturing and adding value here and before we sell offshore. And that is a really hard game. It really is, because of these ups and downs that we have to ride. Just one more plant that we use, because I talked so much about gut health earlier, is a product called Yacon, and it's grown up in Northland, and it's really high in fructooligosaccharides, which is a type of prebiotic that are fantastic for gut health. So that's a really lovely product, lovely story. And I just want to talk about another company that I'm involved in more through the Estino Sheep Company, which I chair, but they are associated really closely with a company called Lanico, which some of you will have heard of, and they produce high quality wool filtration masks, wool filtration systems for things like air conditioning, potentially for motor vehicles and so forth. Incredible technology. And if this company's been kind of on the precipice of hitting it big for some years, and if they do, I honestly think it's this type of company that will save our wool industry. How can we help these companies? Because that's what ag needs. So I'm getting the signal to stop, which is really cool because I'm on my last slide. Next week, I am speaking with a commercial horopito producer. And so I just had to put that beautiful picture of horopito up there because horopito helps reduce candida fungi, which could be a fantastic treatment for thrush in women, natural treatment for thrush in women. And I think we have to find a way to walk the talk. So we have to find a way to take these beautiful products to market and decommoditize them. And we have to do that to improve the biodiversity of ourselves and our planet and improve the health of ourselves and our planet. Thank you.